How often when I am speaking in church, I'm also speaking to the youth on Wednesday nights, and that was the case this week. And I had a message prepared for the youth, and I had a different message prepared for us today. But as the week went on, and I was praying about it and just asking God what was on His heart that He wanted to share, I really felt like the message that I shared on Wednesday night was the message He wanted me to share today. And so I went to Pastor Ken and I said, I know we already made the weeklies, but what if I shared a message that had nothing to do with the focus text and nothing to do with the questions in the weekly? And he said to go for it. So if you want the answers to those questions, you're going to have to wait till next week. But today, I'm getting all confused on my times. Today I wanted to share with you something that's more personal. It's more of a testimony. And I feel like God really puts us in community to share our stories with each other and to encourage each other on. But before I do that, I have a very short 10-second video I want to show you. And I want to set this video up so you know what's going on in it. So this is a video of me. That person on the right, it's kind of blurry. I had to download it off Facebook, so it's off of an iPhone. It's not great quality. It's old. But see that blur in the corner that will become more clear as the video starts? That's me. So this is at my old job in Charlotte, and this is the youth center that we had there. And we had this one night where we had a really big youth center there. We had a really big youth program, and we invited this local martial arts place to come out, and they let us use like all of their gear and stuff, and it was so much fun. And so one of the things that they brought were these, like, I don't know what you call them because I'm not a martial arts person, but basically it's this big suit you wear, and so you can kick somebody full force while they're wearing this, and it will take all the impact, and it won't hurt them at all. So we thought those were fun. So my friend Becca and I, who used to be my roommate, we put on these suits, and we thought, wouldn't it be fun if we run at each other full force and see who can knock who over? And Becca is she's bigger than me, but she's kind of she's more timid, so I was pretty confident in my ability to take her out. And I was kind of as long as I just run totally with all my strength, I've got this, because she's never gonna give it everything. So that's the setup. Here's what happened, if we can roll the video. Thank you. So Becca totally played me. And this video, I can't even tell you how many times my coworkers watched this video over and over and over again. And it wasn't as loud on here, but you can actually hear a very loud thump when I hit the wall. So thank goodness I was wearing that suit. And as funny as this is, it kind of spoke to me about something I think that happens in our lives a lot, where we have a plan. We think we've got everything all figured out, and we commit to the plan full force, and then you hit a wall. Anybody ever been there? You thought you knew how things were going to go, you thought you knew how they were going to play out, and then you just hit a wall, and nothing's going the way you planned. And that's the kind of story I want to share today. And it's a story of two people, actually. The first person is my father. My father's name is Michael Gerald Dwyer Jr., actually. And he is one of the most amazing men I know. I've been really blessed to have an awesome father who has really shown me God's love. There have been so many times in my life when I've just seen very tangibly God's grace through him. And I'll give you one quick example. One random fact about me you might not know is I collect folklore books. I really like fairy tales and folklore from around the world and children's stories. So I buy these books all the time. And when I was younger, maybe 18, first year of college, I was home for a weekend and I wasn't in the best mood. Anybody who has any 18-year-olds in their lives might know that sometimes that happens. And I was being just a terrible person to be around, and I knew it. It wasn't I didn't know, I knew. And I was having this back and forth with my father, and he walked out of the room, and I really thought he would be in his full rights to just kick me out of the house, and so he walks out of the room, he goes away. I thought maybe he had stormed off or something. And he walks back upstairs a couple minutes later, and he's carrying this box. And in the box, he had countless books of all of these fairy tale books and folklore books that he had found at garage sales or different places. And he had thought of me every single time, and he had bought them for me. And he just gave me this box of books in that moment. That was his answer to me being horrible. And I just remember very, very tangibly, like understanding the grace that God pours out on us in that moment, because he just showed me it in such a real way. So I share that story up front just to give you a picture of the kind of man my dad is. And he was so much fun as a little kid. He did embarrass me a lot because he was kind of one of those guys that was like the life of the party. But when you're a kid, you don't want your dad to be the life of the party. When I was in college, he came to visit my college and did Michael Jackson impressions in the campus center. And I'm not talking about like for 1 second. He had a microphone. There was a group of people around him. He had his huge, big, like, black friend doing the female accompaniment. Like, it was a spectacle, and I was just like, I don't know this man. Like, but he was a fun guy. But his life was not always easy, as I'm sure anyone who has lived a number of years knows. And so when my father and my mom met, they were in college, and they had a plan. After they graduated college, my dad was going to go to school, and they took out big loans because they thought the job that he was going to have was going to make him big money, and what he was going to be was a lawyer. And I put up my favorite, this next slide. That's my favorite lawyer movie, which is Liar, Liar, if you've ever seen it. I showed this to the students, and not one of them had seen it, and it made me feel so old. But Jim Carrey is hilarious in this movie, but he's not really like a good lawyer. He's a liar. My dad was not. My dad was like, I think, one of the few honest lawyers there are, and he did become a lawyer. They took out these huge loans because I was like, oh, we'll pay them back when you're a lawyer and you're making all this money. They had 4 kids right away, and I want to tell you a little story about something that happened to him, one of his interactions with a client. But actually, I skipped something first. I want to just share this because I think this is fun. When I was a little kid, I got to go to the Take Your Daughter to Work Day. I don't know if they still do that even, but you get to go to work with your dad. And I got to like sit on the judges' benches a lot of times because I was in a courtroom, and it was so much fun. And I remember like this one judge, he said to me like there was like a 17-year-old on trial. I don't even remember what for. But his mom came up and she's like, my son's always been a good boy. He's never done anything like this. And the judge like leans over to me and he's like, that's what all parents say about their kids. And it was fun, but one of the more touching things the judge said to me once, I remember he said to me, don't tell your father I said this, but I think your father is probably the best trial lawyer I've ever seen. And that was a lot coming from him because he saw a lot of people in action. And so that's to give you a picture of my dad in the courtroom too. So now we have this one client, and her name was Rose. I won't tell you her last name, but there's a lot of Roses in the world, so I think we can safely say that. And Rose was like, she was crazy. I mean, there's no nice way to put this. And just so you get the picture, my dad's like a really compassionate guy, so he took her case, but nobody else would take her case because she had a reputation for being crazy. And so she would come to our house, like if my dad didn't call her back right away because he had a lot of clients, she would come to our house and wait in the front of our house until he got home. Or she would show up like late at night when we were getting ready for bed and be like screaming outside. Like she was not a fun person to be around. And so she was going through a divorce, and they froze the assets in between her and her husband, as they often do in a divorce. And just to give you an idea, again, of how out there she would be, she took a sledgehammer to her house to destroy it, to devalue it. The only reason this woman did not go to jail, basically, was because of my dad. And she was not happy about the assets being frozen. She wanted to get her money. She wanted to get it fast. So she went to my dad, and she told him something that was kind of a game changer. She told him that she had terminal cancer. And so he went and he spoke to the judges, and he basically said, this woman has terminal cancer. She doesn't have a long time to live, so can we please fast track this? Can we move things along? And they did. So let's pause the story there. It sounds like things were sort of working out in a weird way. All this time, my dad did not know Jesus. My dad did not become a Christian until he was about 39 years old, when he went to a church service on an Easter Sunday, and God just got a hold of him. And so when he became a Christian, his life changed. And there were a lot of changes, but one of the changes was that he stopped doing divorce cases. He just felt convicted about that. So I don't know if you've ever experienced this. I think we often expect that when we really commit to follow Jesus, things are going to be just like blue skies and sunny, and it's all going to be better. And it's usually the exact opposite. Jesus promises us trials, tribulation, persecution. And so my dad's life definitely did not get better when he came to know Jesus. So within a year or two, this old case came back up. So Rose was not dying of terminal cancer, and her lies kind of found out, and Rose didn't really want to pay the bills that she had, and all of these things culminated in her basically going and saying, well, I never said that. I never said that I was dying of cancer. He made that up. Now, my dad's secretary was there with him, like she had heard it, so they had a witness, but that would be a big deal because he was a lawyer, and to lie under oath in a courtroom is perjury, and lawyers especially can't do that. So he then had to go to trial for this woman's lie. And everyone told him, don't worry about this. Like, everyone knows Rose. Everyone, knows what she's like. It's not going to go anywhere. You have your secretary who was right there that heard the whole thing. And so he wasn't really that worried about it. So they get to court the day of the trial, and it's a judge that he doesn't know. And the secretary goes to testify, and the judge says she cannot testify because it's hearsay and dismisses her as a witness. Then he also proceeds to dismiss every other lawyer that was going to testify on his behalf and dismiss all the letters of character witness that are written. So it's a really crazy situation, and it really sounds like maybe something shady was going on behind the scenes. And for me and for our whole family, it was kind of one of those moments where you're just like, wow, how can evil prevail in this way so easily? How can this just happen? And so he was found guilty of this, and he was suspended for 2 years from practicing law. And as a lawyer, he had a private practice, so he didn't collect any, insurance when he wasn't practicing. So our family had no income, basically, because my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And he went and he tried to get any job he could get, but no one would hire him because he was overqualified for everything. So finally, through a friend, he got a position working in social work, actually in child advocacy, where he could use his lawyer skills. But he was making $30,000 a year with 4 kids. So we really had to rely on God for our daily bread, not in a figurative sense, in a literal way, people brought us food. But it still was okay, this is only going to be for 2 years, and then, things will get back on track. Well, after the 2 years are up, you don't just get to be okay, and I'm back, and I'm practicing law. You have to go through all of these hoops to get back into the courtroom. So he had to retake the bar exam. Then he had to file his paperwork again. And then you have to wait on the people that approve it, and you just wait and wait until they do that. Well, enough time passed that they thought, something's a little wrong here. So they finally, after bugging the office many, many times, find out the paperwork has been lost. But now so much time has passed that he has to take the bar exam again because they won't count the one that he had taken already. And that would be bad enough if that was just one time. Something like this continues to happen every year for several years. And so what was supposed to be just this 2-year suspension that was already a horrible tragedy now turns into this indefinite, and it was just ridiculous. It really was is something crazy spiritual going on here because something happens every single time. And it was a really trying time for my family. It was very stretching to really have to rely on God in that way and to wonder what he was doing. And so I want to pause my dad's story right there for a moment and go into the next person's story, which is me. Some of you know this, some of you don't know this, but I was actually engaged when I was 27 and not to this handsome man here. And I had, as many young girls do, since the time I noticed boys, I dreamed about getting married. And I really, my heart's desire, among all the other things I did in my life, I really desired to be married and I really desired to have children. And so, 27 might not seem that old, but when you've been wanting that since you were 15, you feel like you've been waiting a long time and you've finally arrived. And so I was so happy and I was so excited to be getting married. And we had all the plans, I want to make it clear that this was not we got engaged, but there's going to be a couple of years and it's not a real engagement and then we'll have the more commitment. I had the dress, I think we have a picture of it. So I had the dress. We had booked the venue. Like, we were ready to get married. And I always say in retrospect, this is a pretty dress, but I actually didn't really love it. My mother-in-law-to-be really loved it. And I think that actually should have been a warning sign to me that foreshadowed some things. But we were ready to get married, but towards the last couple of months before we got married, things just seemed to shift. And I was kind of disconcerted about it, so I was praying for God's wisdom and God's guidance. And I got an answer that I really didn't want or didn't expect. My fiance came to me and he basically told me, I've decided I don't want to follow Jesus anymore. I don't believe the Bible is true, and I know that's who you are, and so I don't want to be with you. And it was devastating. All of my plans, all my dreams came crumbling down. I called my dad that night, and I cried so hard on the phone that I shorted out the phone. I can't imagine being a parent in that moment when you live so far away. My parents are in New York, I'm in North Carolina, and there's nothing you can do, and that happens. And he couldn't even call me back because the phone was dead. So, and I really thought, I don't know how I'm going to breathe. I don't know how I'm going to go on. And I didn't know where God was in all of it or what he was doing. And I was praying, and I was asking him to speak to me. And honestly, it felt like he was silent, and I couldn't see his fingerprints at work. And so I just kind of had to keep walking and keep trusting and hoping. And after a while, something started to change my perspective about how my plans had come to this abrupt halt. And to lighten things up a little bit, I want to show you another video. Actually, there's a video before that one, I think. And to set this one up, if anybody's an Office fan, you'll like this video. This is one of my favorite scenes out of The Office. So Michael and Dwight are driving here. So that's one of my favorite scenes from The Office. I love it, mostly because I get lost a lot and my GPS has led me astray. But I also think it illustrates a point here, and that's sometimes we think we're going the right way and we are committed to the way we are going, and it's not the right way. And it's kind of weird to think of Dwight as being like the voice of reason in this situation, but sometimes God he's not out to ruin our plans. He's not out to crush our dreams. He has something better, and he just wants to redirect us. Maybe what we think of as a stop sign is really just a turn signal. And so I love this verse, and it was the verse that was just up there. And it's very simple. It says, "In his heart a man plans his course, but the Lord determines his steps." And I feel like you can read this verse two ways. You could read it in a negative way if you wanted to. It doesn't matter what your plans are because God's got his. Or you could look at it in a positive way and realize that we might have these plans, but we really don't know what's best for us. And God, in his love for us, intervenes and determines our steps. And that's really what happened in my story and in my dad's story. You see, 3 years later, I met Jason. And it just kind of blew my mind how much better that relationship was and how much I would have been settling and not even knowing I was settling, that I thought I had the best because I hadn't experienced it yet. And 2 years after that, we have a picture, I think, of our wedding. But the next picture is me and my dad. That's my dad and I at my wedding in a dress that I love. But something even cooler happened at this wedding, if we can go to the next picture. This is a picture of our wedding, and it's kind of far away, so you can't see. But that guy standing in between us, performing the ceremony, is my father. My dad didn't just get to walk me down the aisle, he actually got to give me away and to marry me to Jason, because God had a different plan for his life. And God basically told him through this long period, you are a good lawyer, but you would be a great pastor. And so God used this to redirect his life. And he used the skills that he had as a lawyer to work in children's lives, in child advocacy. And through this long period of trial that he had, he learned so much grace and compassion. My father is one of the best pastors that I know. I would send anybody to him without question, and not just because he's my dad. And it's just this amazing testimony of how God really does have better plans than we can imagine. Because if you had told him back then when all that was happening, like that God had this plan for him, he would never have believed it. He didn't even know like he was capable of doing it. And now he loves what he does, and he has so much joy in it. There's a verse that I think we all know, and it's so simple that we take it for granted, but I want us to really get the power of it. It says, we know that in all things God works for the good of those that love him, who have been called according to his purposes. This is more than a statement. This is a promise. God promises us that in all things, in the worst things that we're going through, when our life seems to have completely hit a wall, he is at work and he's working for our good. And I think it's important to note here that he's working for our good too. I don't know about you, but I can have the temptation, when somebody says God's in control, I have a temptation to be like, well, I know he's in control, but that doesn't mean it's going to be good for me. You know, like maybe I'm a pawn in the game and he's working towards some big end. This verse promises us that we are not pawns, that he's not just working towards some bigger purpose with no care to us. That in the way that only God can, he's not just working for his great purpose, but he's working individually in each of our lives for our good. So you can trust his heart for you. You can trust that when things are not going as you planned, that he is working for your good. And you might not be able to see those fingerprints for days or weeks or years, but there is going to come a time when you're going to be able to look back and see, now I see what he was doing. So I just want to take a moment today to pray, and to pray specifically for the people in this room who are in that place right now, where they just feel like, I don't know what he's doing at all. I felt like I knew how my life was going, and it's nowhere near where I thought it would be. And if you're not in that place right now, I just encourage you as we pray to pray for the people that are, because there are definitely people there. So will you join me in prayer? Father, thank you for this promise. Thank you that you care about us. I don't know why. We have betrayed you, we have run from you, we have turned from you, and yet you have bought us back at a high price. We are your beloved. I pray that we would just know that.